My narcissist ex invited me to his wedding to humiliate me. But I arrived with his outcast brother he hated for being more handsome. The groom turned pale. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. The winter wind coming off Lake Michigan has a way of cutting right through you, finding the places in your coat that aren't quite buttoned tight enough and settling into your bones. Standing there outside the heavy oak doors of the Lake Forest Country Club, I could feel that chill biting at my ankles, but honestly, it was nothing compared to the icy knot that had been sitting in my stomach for the last 3 weeks. I looked down at the invitation in my hand one last time. It was heavy stock, cream-colored, with gold-embossed lettering that probably cost more than my entire grocery budget for the month. It was beautiful, objectively speaking. But it was the handwritten note inside, in that familiar, jagged scrawl, that made my blood run hot despite the freezing temperature. Elena, I think you need to see what true success looks like. Come sign the final papers regarding the intellectual property rights, and I'll pay off that credit card debt you're struggling with. Consider it a parting gift. Don't bring a +1. We both know there isn't anyone, anyway. That was Derek. Even on the day he was marrying a woman 20 years his junior, the daughter of a banking tycoon, he couldn't resist one last twist of the knife. He needed me here. Not to celebrate, but to witness. He needed me to see him standing at the altar of this cathedral of wealth, proving once and for all that he was the king and I was just the stepping stone he had trampled on to get there. He wanted me to be the dusty relic of his past, the 42-year-old woman in a sensible pantsuit standing in the back, clutching a purse full of regrets. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs. The old Elena, the one who had spent a decade drawing blueprints in the shadows while he took the bows in the spotlight, would have turned around. She would have gone home, cried into a glass of cheap wine, and mailed him the signed papers just to make the conflict go away. But that Elena died the day he evicted me from the house I designed. I reached out and pushed the heavy door open. A wave of warmth and the smell of expensive lilies hit me instantly. The foyer was crowded with the elite of Chicago, men in tuxedos discussing their stock portfolios and women in gowns that cost a year's tuition. The noise was a dull roar of polite laughter and clinking crystal. I stepped into the light. I wasn't wearing a sensible pantsuit. I was wearing a floor-length gown made of deep, red wine velvet that hugged every curve I had stopped hiding. It had a slit that went just high enough to be dangerous, and the fabric caught the light in a way that made it look like liquid fire. I had spent hours pinning my hair up into an elegant, loose chignon, leaving my neck bare except for a single, stunning diamond drop necklace that sparkled under the chandeliers. The chatter near the entrance died down. Heads turned. I saw a woman I recognized, one of Derek's cousins who used to make fun of my cooking, literally stop mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open. I didn't look at her. I looked straight ahead, toward the far end of the ballroom where the groom was holding court. Derek was laughing at something his future father-in-law was saying, a champagne flute in his hand. He looked older than I remembered, the stress of his lies starting to etch lines around his eyes that no amount of expensive skincare could hide. Then, he felt the shift in the room. He turned. His eyes found me. For a second, there was just confusion. He squinted, as if trying to reconcile the glamorous woman in the doorway with the tired assistant image he had sold to everyone. Then, recognition hit him. His smirk started to form, that arrogant tilt of the lips that said, "So, you came for the money." But the smirk didn't last. Because I didn't step forward alone. From the shadows of the vestibule behind me, a hand reached out. It was a strong, large hand, calloused but manicured, resting possessively on the small of my back. Caleb stepped into the light next to me. If the room was quiet before, it was silent now. Derek's younger brother, the black sheep, the man the family had labeled a failure and embarrassment because he worked with his hands, was standing there. But he didn't look like a failure. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders that came from years of physical labor, not hours at a gym. His hair, usually shaggy and full of sawdust, was cut in a sharp, modern style that highlighted his piercing blue eyes and strong jawline. He looked like a movie star from the golden age of Hollywood. He looked dangerous. He looked powerful. And he was looking at me like I was the only person in the room. Caleb leaned down and whispered something in my ear, making me smile, a genuine, radiant smile that I knew Derek could see from across the room. I looked back at my ex. The color had drained from his face so completely he looked like a wax figure. His hand went slack. The crystal champagne flute he was holding slipped through his fingers. Smash. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the silent ballroom, sharp and violent. Champagne splashed onto his polished Italian shoes, but he didn't even look down. He was staring at his brother, the brother he hated, the brother he had mocked for years, standing next to the woman he had discarded, and for the first time in his life, Derek looked terrified. Because he knew. In that split second, he knew we weren't just guests. We were the reckoning. To understand why the sight of us standing there made a grown man drop his drink, you have to understand where we started. You have to understand that for 10 years, I wasn't a person to Derek. I was an asset. A resource. A battery he drained until he thought there was no charge left. It began over a decade ago at the University of Illinois. I was in the final year of my master's in architecture, surviving on caffeine and the dream of building spaces that mattered. Derek was an MBA student, the kind of guy who wore suits to class and talked loudly about leverage and scalability in the campus coffee shop. He charmed me. I won't lie and say he didn't. He had this way of looking at you like you were the most brilliant person he had ever met, listening to your ideas with an intensity that felt like love. I was shy, focused on my drafting table, and he was the explosion of color in my gray world. You have the vision, Elena, he told me one night, tracing the lines of a blueprint I had spent weeks on. But vision needs a voice. I can be that voice. We can build an empire. You design the world, and I'll sell it to them. It sounded like a partnership. It sounded like a marriage of minds. So, when you proposed a year later with a modest ring and a promise of a shared future, I said yes. I thought I was gaining a husband and a business partner. I didn't realize I was signing an employment contract where I would never be paid. We started DH Developments. Notice the initials. His, not ours. He convinced me it was better for branding. Clients want a strong male figurehead, he said, smoothing my hair. It's just marketing, babe. Behind closed doors, it's 50-50. I believed him. God, I was so naive. I spent the next 8 years hunched over drafting tables in the back room of our office, and later, in the home office of the house we bought. I designed luxury condos that revitalized downtown. I sketched the layouts for eco-friendly office parks that won awards. And every time there was a gala, an award ceremony, or a magazine interview, Derek was the one in the tuxedo, smiling for the cameras. My wife helps with the administrative side, he would tell reporters, laughing lightly. She keeps me organized. I remember the night he won the Innovator of the Year award. I was sitting at table 12, near the kitchen doors, because he said there weren't enough seats at the head table for spouses. I watched him hold up the trophy, a trophy given for a building I had designed from the foundation up. I'd like to thank my own genius, he joked to the crowd, and they roared with laughter. No, seriously, it takes a singular vision to see a skyline and know how to change it. He didn't mention me. Not once. When we got home that night, I tried to bring it up. Derek, you said we were partners. That design was my thesis project. He sighed, loosening his tie, looking at me with that pitying expression one might give a slow child. Elena, don't be petty. Does it matter whose name is on the plaque? The money goes into our joint account. I'm out there hustling, shaking hands, dealing with the stress of the salary negotiations and the unions. You get to sit at home in your pajamas and draw pretty pictures. I'm protecting you from the real world. He made me feel small. He made me feel like my contribution was a hobby, a cute little pastime that he indulged. He gaslit me so effectively that I started to believe him. I started to think that maybe I couldn't handle the business side. Maybe I needed him to survive. Meanwhile, the joint account he mentioned was something I rarely saw. He gave me an allowance. A literal allowance, like a teenager. Investments are tight right now, he'd say whenever I asked why we couldn't afford a vacation, even though he drove a new Porsche. I'm putting everything back into the company for our future retirement. I worked 16-hour days. I managed the contractors, I solved the structural engineering problems, I dealt with the zoning permits. And he managed the image. I was the engine of the car, hidden under the hood, covered in grease and heat. He was the shiny paint job that everyone admired. And he made sure I stayed under the hood, convinced that without him, I was just a pile of useless parts. But the cracks were starting to show. Not in the buildings I designed, those were solid. The cracks were in the facade of the perfect life he was building on top of my back. And the first time I really saw the ugliness underneath wasn't at the office. It was at his mother's dining table. If Derek was the king of his own imaginary castle, his mother, Patricia, was the queen mother who guarded the gates with a poisoned spear. The first time I met her, she looked at my shoes, sensible flats I wore for site visits, and curled her lip as if I had tracked manure onto her Persian rug. "So, you're the helper Derek told me about," she said, not extending a hand. "I suppose every great man needs someone to handle the minutiae." I tried to correct her. I tried to explain that I was an architect, his partner, his fiancé. But she just waved a hand, her diamond bracelets clinking. "Details, dear. As long as you keep him happy and don't spend too much of his money." Dinners at Patricia's house in Lake Forest were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The house was a museum of cold, hard surfaces and expensive art that no one looked at. It was at these dinners that I realized Derek's narcissism wasn't a glitch, it was a family heirloom, passed down from mother to son. But there was someone else at those dinners. A ghost in the corner. Caleb. Derek's younger brother was everything Derek was not. While Derek was polished, loud, and constantly demanding attention, Caleb was quiet, rugged, and seemingly always in the background. He didn't wear suits. He wore flannel shirts and jeans that had sawdust in the cuffs. He didn't work in finance or development. He worked with his hands. Patricia treated him like a servant she couldn't legally fire. "Caleb, don't sit on the good upholstery with those pants," she would snap when he walked in. "Go wash up in the guest bathroom, not the main one." At dinner, the conversation revolved entirely around Derek. "Tell us about the new skyscraper, darling," Patricia would coo, ladling the best cuts of roast beef onto Derek's plate. "Tell us how you outsmarted those city council idiots." Caleb would sit at the far end of the table, often served last, eating in silence. I watched him. I saw hands that were scarred and strong, eyes that held a depth of sadness and intelligence that no one else seemed to notice. Occasionally, our eyes would meet across the centerpiece, and he would offer me a small, tired smile. A smile of solidarity. "I know," that smile said. "I'm trapped here too." The breaking point, or at least, the moment that seared itself into my memory, happened 2 years into my marriage with Derek. It was Thanksgiving. The table was set with the fine china. I had spent 3 days helping Patricia's cook prepare the meal because Patricia refused to lift a finger and the help needed supervision. Derek was regaling the table with a story about firing a contractor, a man I knew had 3 kids and was just asking for a fair wage. Derek thought it was hilarious. He was waving his arms, animating the story, holding a glass of heavy red wine. Caleb reached across the table to pass the gravy boat to his aunt. It was a simple, polite gesture. But Derek, caught up in his performance, didn't see him. Derek's arm swung out and knocked the gravy boat right out of Caleb's hand. Hot, brown gravy exploded everywhere. It covered the tablecloth, the turkey, and splattered across the front of Derek's expensive Italian silk tie. The room went dead silent. "You clumsy idiot!" Derek roared, jumping up. "Look what you did! This tie cost $400. Do you have any idea how much money you just wasted?" It was Derek's fault. Everyone saw it. He had flailed his arm. But the narrative shifted instantly. "Caleb!" Patricia shrieked, rushing to Derek with a napkin, dabbing at his chest like he had been shot. "Why are you always so careless? You ruin everything beautiful in this house. You're just like your father was, clumsy and useless." Caleb sat there, gravy dripping from his own hand onto his jeans. He didn't defend himself. He looked like a man who had been beaten down so many times that defending himself just took too much energy. "I'm sorry," Caleb said quietly. "I'll pay for the tie." "With what money?" Derek sneered, his face red with rage. "That sawdust money you make building birdhouses? Don't insult me. Just get out of my face." "Go to the kitchen, Caleb," Patricia commanded, not even looking at her younger son. "Finish your meal there. I won't have you upsetting Derek's digestion." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around the table. The aunts, the cousins, they all looked down at their plates, complicit in their silence. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Derek snapped. "To help him clean up," I said, my voice shaking. "Sit down, Elena," Patricia warned. "He's a grown man. He made the mess, he can deal with it." "No," I said. It was the first time I had ever defied her. "It was an accident. And frankly, Derek, you knocked it out of his hand." I grabbed a handful of napkins and walked into the kitchen. Caleb was standing by the sink, running his burned hand under cold water. He looked up when I entered, surprise widening his blue eyes. "You shouldn't be in here, Elena," he murmured. "They'll make your life hell." "They already do," I said, handing him a towel. "Let me see the burn." I touched his hand. It was rough, warm, and trembling slightly. For a moment, just a moment, the air in the kitchen felt charged. Not with romance, not yet, but with humanity. It was two hostages acknowledging each other in the dark. "Thank you," he whispered. That was the seed. It took years to grow, but that was the moment I realized that the failure of the family was the only one with any dignity. And the success I was married to was a monster in a silk tie. The collapse of my life didn't happen with a bang, like the gravy boat incident. It happened with the slow, suffocating slide of numbers on a spreadsheet that didn't add up. About 5 years into the marriage, Derek's spending habits shifted from luxurious to manic. He bought a boat we never used. He leased a penthouse in the city for late nights at the office. He started talking about expanding into international markets, using buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. I was handling the project management, but he had slowly locked me out of the financials. "You worry about the blueprints, babe," he'd say, closing his laptop whenever I walked into the room. "The finance is boring stuff. Leave the headache to me." But I wasn't just an architect, I was a detail-oriented person. I noticed the overdue notices he tried to hide in the trash. I noticed the calls from unknown numbers that he took in the garage. One afternoon, I came home early from a site visit to find a courier leaving our driveway. He had delivered a large envelope from the bank. It was addressed to DH Developments, but the secondary name on the envelope caught my eye. It wasn't Derek's. It was Elena Vance. I opened it. My hands started to shake so hard I nearly dropped the papers on the driveway. It was a foreclosure warning on a commercial property I didn't even know we owned. And worse, there was a credit line statement attached. A credit line of $200,000, taken out in my name, using my social security number, completely maxed out. The charges weren't for construction materials. They were for jewelry stores. 5-star hotels in Miami. Designer handbags. A lease on a luxury apartment in the Gold Coast district. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. I drove straight to his office. He wasn't there. His secretary, a nervous young woman named Sarah, looked at me with pity. "He's at a lunch meeting," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "At the Palmer House. With the investors." I drove to the hotel. I didn't find him in the restaurant. On a hunch, a sickening, gut-wrenching hunch, I went to the front desk. I didn't have to ask much. The concierge knew me as Mrs. Vance. "Mr. Vance is in the suite on the 12th floor," he said helpfully. I went up. I stood outside the door and heard laughter. Not business laughter. Intimate laughter. I used my keycard. Derek never changed the codes on his business suites. I walked in. Derek was there. He was in a bathrobe, holding a glass of champagne. And sitting on the sofa, wearing nothing but one of my missing silk scarves, was Tiffany. I knew who she was. Tiffany was the 20-something daughter of our biggest banking partner. She was young, she was vapid, and her father held the keys to the loans Derek desperately needed to cover his bad debts. They froze. "Elena," Derek said. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. Like I was a maid who had walked in to clean at the wrong time. "You used my identity," I said, my voice eerily calm. I held up the bank papers. "You stole $200,000 in my name to fund this?" Tiffany looked at the papers, then at Derek. "Daddy said you were rich," she squeaked. Derek stepped forward, his face hardening. "Don't be dramatic, Elena. It's a bridge loan. I'm handling it." "You're cheating on me," I said, the reality finally hitting me. "With a child." "Tiffany represents the future," Derek sneered, dropping the facade entirely. "Look at you, Elena. You're tired. You're always covered in graphite and dust. You're boring. Tiffany comes from a world of connections. Her father can double my portfolio overnight. What can you do? Draw another pretty picture?" "I built your company," I screamed. "I drew every single building that made you rich. And who owns the rights?" Derek smiled, a cruel, predatory smile. "Check your employment contract again, sweetie. The company owns everything. And I own the company." "I want a divorce," I said. "And I'm going to the police about the fraud." Derek laughed. He walked over to his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Go ahead. But remember, the debt is in your name. And I have lawyers who will drag this out until you're living in a cardboard box. Or, you can leave quietly. I'll take over the payments on the debt eventually, if you don't make a scene. But if you try to fight me, I'll ruin you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." He looked at Tiffany. "Get dressed, babe. We have a dinner reservation." I was evicted from my own life that day. I returned home to find the locks already changed. My clothes, the ones he hadn't given to Tiffany, were in garbage bags on the lawn. He had moved fast. He had been planning this for months. I sat on the curb next to a bag of winter coats, watching the sun go down over the house I had designed, realizing I had nothing. No money. No home. No husband. Just a mountain of debt and a broken heart. I was the invisible woman, and he had finally erased me completely. Or so he thought. The next 6 months were a blur of humiliation and survival. I moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were a nightly lullaby. It was the size of my old walk-in closet. The heating rattled, the faucet leaked, and the view was a brick wall. I tried to get hired at other firms, but Derek had been true to his word. He had poisoned the well. Rumors swirled that I was unstable, that I had embezzled money, that I was incompetent. In the tight-knit world of Chicago architecture, reputation is currency, and mine was bankrupt. I survived by taking freelance jobs online under a pseudonym, designing deck additions and garage conversions for peanuts. I ate ramen noodles. I counted every quarter for the laundromat. The debt collectors called 5 times a day. Every time the phone rang, my stomach clenched. I was broken. I felt stupid. How could I, an educated, intelligent woman, let this happen? That's the thing about narcissistic abuse, it creeps up on you. It's a slow poison. You don't realize you're dying until you're already in the grave. Then, one rainy Tuesday, I was at a coffee shop using their free Wi-Fi because I couldn't afford internet at home. I looked up and saw a familiar face standing in line, looking wet and miserable. It was Sarah, Derek's former secretary. She looked rough. Her eyes were puffy, and she was clutching a folder to her chest. She saw me and hesitated, looking like she wanted to run. "Sarah?" I called out. She walked over slowly. "Mrs. Vance. I mean, Elena. I heard what happened." "Sit down," I said. "I'll buy you a coffee." It was my last $5, but something told me I needed to talk to her. We sat. Sarah burst into tears before the latte even arrived. "He fired me," she sobbed. "Yesterday. Just like that. No severance, no notice. He said I was disloyal because I refused to lie to the auditors about the Cayman accounts." My ears perked up. "What Cayman accounts?" Sarah wiped her nose. "He's been moving money for years. Siphoning it off from the construction loans. He pads the material costs, claims he's buying high-grade marble but buys cheap stuff and pockets the difference. Then he hides it offshore. That's why he needed the loan in your name, to cover a gap before the auditors came last time." She looked at me, fear in her eyes. "He's doing it to Tiffany's dad now. He's setting up a massive joint venture, getting the bank to front millions, and he's planning to drain it and run. He talks about it on the phone when he thinks no one is listening. He calls Tiffany a useful idiot." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was different from the sadness I had been living with. This was sharp. This was useful. "Sarah," I said, leaning in. "Do you have proof?" She tapped the folder she was holding. "I made copies. Before he locked me out of the server, I downloaded the email chains, the falsified invoices, the audio recordings from the dictaphone he forgets to turn off. I was going to take it to the labor board just to get my unemployment benefits." I reached out and put my hand on hers. "Sarah, we can do better than unemployment benefits. We can get justice." We spent the next 3 hours going through the documents. It was all there. The fraud. The embezzlement. The plan to marry Tiffany, access her family trust, and then likely discard her just like he did me. But having the evidence wasn't enough. We needed a way to deliver it that would destroy him. A lawsuit would take years, and he had expensive lawyers. We needed something public. Something that would shatter his reputation instantly, so that no amount of spin could save him. That was when I remembered the invitation. It had arrived at my mother's house, my only permanent mailing address, a week ago, forwarded to me. I hadn't thrown it away. I had kept it as a reminder of my pain. Now, looking at the spreadsheet of stolen millions, I realized it wasn't an invitation to a wedding. It was an invitation to a funeral. His. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally. Someone who knew the family. Someone who had access. I need to fix a chair, I said randomly to Sarah. She looked confused. What? I have an old chair I found in the alley. I need to fix it to sell it for rent money. And I know exactly who to ask for help. I stood up, packing the documents into my bag. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like an architect again. And I was about to design the most beautiful demolition Chicago had ever seen. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic out to the edge of the city, past the industrial parks and the forgotten warehouses. I was looking for a specific address I had memorized years ago from a Christmas card envelope Patricia had thrown in the trash because she didn't want clutter. It was a nondescript brick building with a faded sign that just said Vance Millwork. I parked and walked to the roll-up door. The smell hit me first, the rich, earthy scent of sawdust, cedar, and varnish. It was a smell of creation, so different from the sterile, money-scented air of Derek's office. I knocked. The sound of a table saw died down. A moment later, the door slid open. Caleb stood there. He looked different than I remembered. He was wearing protective goggles pushed up on his forehead, his face smudged with dirt, a tight gray t-shirt covered in wood shavings. He looked older, broader, more solid. He blinked, wiping his hands on a rag. Elena? Hi, Caleb, I said, feeling suddenly shy. Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting. No, he said, his voice rough from disuse. No, never. Come in. He stepped aside. I walked into the shop, and my breath caught in my throat. I expected a dusty workshop with piles of lumber. What I saw was an art gallery. Everywhere I looked, there were pieces of furniture that were breathtaking. A dining table made of live-edge walnut that looked like a flowing river. Chairs with curves so delicate they looked like they would snap, but I knew they were solid as rock. The craftsmanship was exquisite. It was genius. I walked over to a credenza with intricate inlays. You made this? Caleb shrugged, closing the door behind us. Yeah. Just messing around. Messing around? I touched the wood. Caleb, this is incredible. This looks like a C.W. Vance piece. Caleb went still. He looked at me, a strange expression on his face. You know C.W. Vance? Of course, I said. He's the most sought-after bespoke furniture maker in the Midwest. Architects kill to get his pieces in their showrooms. No one knows who he is, though. He's a recluse. Caleb walked over to a workbench, picked up a branding iron, and held it up. The tip was the reversed initials, CWV. Caleb William Vance. My jaw dropped. It's you. He smiled, a crooked, shy smile that transformed his face. Don't tell my mother. She thinks I fix cabinets for a living. If she knew I was selling tables for $20,000 a pop to the people she tries to impress, she'd want a cut. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed genuinely in months. You're hiding your success. Just like I was hiding my talent. I heard what happened, Caleb said, his face turning serious. He leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. I wanted to call you. But I didn't have your number, and Derek made it clear that anyone who talked to you was dead to him. He destroyed me, Caleb, I said, the tears threatening to spill. He took my money, my home, my designs. And now he's going to do it to that girl, Tiffany. I know, Caleb said darkly. He tried to get me to build the furniture for his new house for free. Said it would be good exposure for me. I'm going to the wedding, I said. Caleb looked surprised. Why? To torture yourself? No. To end it. I pulled the folder Sarah gave me out of my bag. I have proof, Caleb. Proof of everything. But I can't just walk in there alone. He'll have security throw me out before I can open my mouth. I need backup. I need someone the family can't ignore. Caleb looked at the folder, then at me. He looked at my worn coat, my tired eyes, and the fire burning behind them. He treated you like garbage, Caleb said softly. He treated us both like garbage. He thinks we're weak, I said. He thinks you're a failure and I'm a has-been. I want to show him he's wrong. Caleb stepped closer. He reached out and gently brushed a wood shaving from my shoulder. His touch was electric, warm, and grounding. I haven't worn a suit in 5 years, he said. I can help with that, I whispered. And I haven't been to a family event since the gravy incident. We can make a new memory, I said. Caleb smiled, and this time, it wasn't shy. It was fierce. It was the look of a wolf who is done hiding in the woods. Okay, he said. Let's crash a wedding. The next week was a flurry of strategic planning that felt less like wedding prep and more like a military operation. We set up a war room in the loft above Caleb's workshop. It was me, Caleb, and Sarah. Sarah was the tech genius of the operation. Okay, Sarah said, pulling up the schematics of the Lake Forest Country Club on her laptop. I still have the login credentials for the event planning software Derek uses. He never changes his passwords. It's always Derek King 1. I rolled my eyes. Of course it is. The wedding planner has scheduled a slideshow for the reception, Sarah explained, pointing to the screen. It's supposed to be a montage of Derek and Tiffany's love story. It runs off a central server connected to the massive LED wall behind the head table. Can we hack it? Caleb asked, pouring us coffee. I don't need to hack it, Sarah grinned. My boyfriend, Mike, works for the AV company hired for the event. He's going to be running the board. If I give him a thumb drive, he can swap the source file at the exact moment we signal. Perfect, I said. But we need to time it right. It has to be during the speeches. When everyone is focused on the stage. When Derek feels the most safe. Just then, my phone rang. It was Derek. I put it on speaker. Caleb moved closer, his jaw tightening. Elena, Derek's voice oozed through the speaker, slick and condescending. I noticed you haven't returned the signed IP waiver yet. The wedding is in 2 days. I'm reading it over, Derek, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There's nothing to read, he snapped. It's standard. Look, if I don't have that paper on my desk by Monday morning, I'm filing a lawsuit for trade secret theft. I'll claim you stole the client list when you left. I have lawyers on retainer who eat little freelancers like you for breakfast. You wouldn't, I said, feigning fear. Try me, he laughed. Oh, and about the wedding. I was serious about the +1. Don't bring some loser date just to make me jealous. It would be pathetic. Actually, maybe just mail the papers. You don't really fit in with this crowd anymore. Caleb reached out and squeezed my hand. His grip was an anchor. I'll bring the papers, Derek, I said. In person. I want to wish you and Tiffany luck. You're going to need it. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. He really thinks he's untouchable, Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. He is, I said. Until we strip away the armor. We need to make sure we survive the first hour, Sarah noted. The moment you walk in, he's going to try to corner you or kick you out. You need to be bulletproof. We won't just be bulletproof, Caleb said, looking at me. We're going to be undeniable. We need to look like we own the place. We need to look like old money. Like the kind of people his new in-laws respect. I looked at Caleb. Under the grime of the workshop, he had a rugged handsomeness that Derek's plastic surgery could never replicate. We have some shopping to do, I said. And Caleb? We need to cut that hair. He ran a hand through his shaggy mane. Whatever it takes, Elena. I'm doing this for you. But I'm also doing it for the kid who got yelled at for spilling gravy. I'm doing it to show my mother that she bet on the wrong horse. We spent the rest of the night curating the evidence. The emails where Derek called Tiffany's father a senile cash cow. The bank statements showing the embezzlement. The text messages to his mistress in Miami. We compiled it all into a video file titled The Real Love Story. It was vicious. It was nuclear. And it was absolutely necessary. The day before the wedding, we went into the city. But we didn't go to the flashy boutiques on Michigan Avenue where Derek shopped, places where the logos were big and the fabrics were cheap. I took Caleb to a bespoke tailor on Oak Street, a place that didn't have a sign in the window, just a heavy wooden door. Trust me, I whispered as we walked in. The tailor, an old Italian man named Marco, looked Caleb up and down. Broad shoulders. Good posture. We can work with this. We chose a midnight blue tuxedo with a black shawl collar. It was classic, understated, and screamed expensive without whispering a word. When Caleb walked out of the dressing room, the transformation was shocking. The suit tamed his wildness but didn't hide his power. He looked like James Bond, but with calloused hands that could build a house. How does it feel? I asked. He tugged at the cuffs. Like armor. Next was the barber. We shaved off the scruffy beard, leaving just a shadow of stubble. We cut the hair short on the sides, leaving length on top to style back. When the barber spun the chair around, I gasped. Caleb wasn't just handsome. He was devastating. His blue eyes popped against the clean cut. He looked sophisticated, worldly, and intensely masculine. You clean up nice, Vance, I said, catching his eye in the mirror. He blushed. You haven't even found your dress yet. I found it at a vintage consignment shop in the Gold Coast. It was a vintage Valentino, deep red wine velvet. It was timeless. It didn't follow the trends of the season, it set its own. It fit me like it was sewn on my body. That night, back at his loft, we were exhausted but buzzing with energy. I was steaming the dress while Caleb polished his shoes. I have something for you, Caleb said suddenly. He walked over to his workbench and picked up a small wooden box. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a necklace. But not just any necklace. It was a teardrop diamond, a real one, set in a delicate band of dark, polished wood and gold. It was a fusion of nature and luxury. Caleb, I breathed. This is... I made the setting, he said, looking down. The diamond, well, it was my grandmother's. She left it to me, not Derek, because she said I was the only one with a heart. I've been saving it for the right moment. I can't accept this, I said. It's too valuable. He took the necklace from the box and walked behind me. He brushed my hair aside and fastened the clasp. His fingers lingered on my neck for a second longer than necessary. You need to look like a queen tomorrow, Elena, he whispered close to my ear. Because you are one. Derek treated you like a peasant. Tomorrow, we show him he threw away the crown jewels. I turned around to face him. We were inches apart. I could smell the cedar soap he used and the faint scent of new wool. The air between us was thick, heavy with everything we hadn't said yet. The shared trauma, the growing respect, the undeniable attraction. Thank you, I said softly. He looked at my lips, then back up to my eyes. He didn't kiss me. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me was more intimate than any touch. Get some sleep, he said, his voice husky. We have a big day tomorrow. We're going to make history. I went to the guest room, clutching the diamond at my throat. For the first time in years, I didn't have nightmares about Derek. Instead, I dreamed of wood and velvet, of shattering glass, and of a blue-eyed man who saw me when I was invisible. We were ready. The stage was set. The players were in costume. And the villain had no idea that the curtain was about to rise on his final act. The sound of the champagne glass shattering on the marble floor was like a gunshot. It severed the low hum of polite conversation, creating a vacuum of silence that sucked the air right out of the room. Every head turned. 300 people, the cream of Chicago society, the bankers, the developers, the people who thought they owned the world, were staring at us. For a moment, nobody moved. The waitstaff froze with trays of hors d'oeuvres suspended in midair. The string quartet in the corner trailed off, the cellist's bow hovering uncertainly over the strings. I stood there in the entryway, my hand resting in the crook of Caleb's arm, and I felt a surge of power I hadn't felt in a decade. Next to me, Caleb was a statue of calm. He didn't flinch under the weight of the stairs. In fact, he seemed to grow taller, his presence expanding to fill the space. The midnight blue tuxedo we had chosen was perfection. It made him look dark, dangerous, and undeniably expensive. It was a stark contrast to the flashy, somewhat gaudy white dinner jacket Derek was wearing, which suddenly looked like a costume from a bad musical. Derek was the first to break the paralysis. He stared at the shattered glass at his feet, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. He looked up, his eyes darting from me to Caleb, trying to process the impossibility of what he was seeing. His brother, the carpenter, the failure, was standing there looking like royalty. And his ex-wife, the drudge, the worn-out assistant, was glowing in vintage Valentino and diamonds. Derek plastered a fake smile on his face, a terrifying rictus of panic, and stepped over the broken glass, moving toward us with a quick, aggressive stride. He was trying to intercept us before we could reach the main crowd, before his future father-in-law, Mr. Sterling, could get a good look. "Elena," Derek hissed as he got close, his voice low enough that only we could hear, vibrating with suppressed rage. "What the hell are you doing? I told you no plus ones." "And him? You brought him? Are you trying to make this a circus?" "Hello, Derek," I said, my voice smooth and cool as a frozen lake. "You invited me to witness your success. I thought your brother should see it too. Family is everything, isn't it?" Caleb looked down at Derek. He had a good 3 inches on his older brother, something I had never really noticed until now because Caleb had always slumped his shoulders in this family's presence. Not tonight. Tonight, his posture was impeccable. "Congratulations, Derek," Caleb said. His tone was perfectly polite, but there was a steel edge to it. "Nice venue. A bit flashy, but that's your brand, right?" "Get out," Derek whispered, his eyes bulging. "Security will." "Derek!" A booming voice interrupted him. We all turned. Mr. Sterling, the banking tycoon whose money Derek was desperate to get his hands on, was walking toward us. He was a large man with a white mustache and eyes that had seen every scam in the book. He wasn't looking at Derek. He was staring at Caleb. "I don't believe it," Mr. Sterling said, stopping in front of us. He squinted at Caleb, then broke into a wide, genuine grin. "You're C.W. Vance, aren't you?" Derek froze. "What?" "No, Arthur, this is just my brother Caleb. He does handiwork." Mr. Sterling ignored Derek completely. He reached out and shook Caleb's hand vigorously. I'd know that jawline from the profile piece in Architectural Digest last month. They didn't print your full face, but I recognized the intensity. "Mr. Vance, my wife and I have been on your waiting list for a dining set for 18 months. Your agent keeps telling us you're booked solid." The silence in the room shifted quality. It went from confused to intrigued. The whispers started. "C.W. Vance? The artist? The one who sells tables for $50,000? Caleb smiled, and it was the most charming thing I had ever seen. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Sterling." I apologize for the wait. I'm a perfectionist with my wood. I don't let a piece leave the shop until it has a soul. A soul? Mr. Sterling laughed, clapping Caleb on the shoulder. See, Derek? That's passion. You talk about profit margins, your brother talks about soul. You should take notes. Derek looked like he had swallowed a live toad. His narrative, the story he had told everyone about his loser brother, was crumbling in the first 5 minutes. He opened his mouth to say something, to reclaim the spotlight, but Mr. Sterling was already ushering us further into the room. Come, come. You must meet Tiffany. She loves your work. She wanted a Vance coffee table for the new house, didn't she, Derek? I wasn't aware, Derek stammered, sweating visibly now. We walked into the party not as unwanted guests, but as VIPs. I caught a glimpse of Patricia, Derek's mother, standing by the bar. She was clutching her pearls, her face pale. She had spent years telling her friends her younger son was a disappointment. Now, the richest man in the room was fawning over him. I locked eyes with her and gave a small, polite nod. She looked away, unable to hold my gaze. You're doing great, I whispered to Caleb as we tipped glasses of champagne from a passing tray. I'm shaking, he whispered back, keeping his smile fixed. You're the most powerful man in the room, I said. And look at Derek. He's terrified. And he was. Derek was hovering near us, eyes darting around, looking for a way to separate us, to control the damage. He realized he couldn't kick us out now, not without offending his father-in-law. We were inside the fortress. And we had brought the dynamite. The cocktail hour was in full swing. The room was a sea of sequins and black ties, smelling of expensive perfume and greed. I navigated the crowd with a grace I didn't know I possessed. For years, I had walked behind Derek, keeping my head down. Tonight, people were parting for me. I noticed Derek signaling to me from near the kitchen entrance, a blind spot away from the cameras and the guests. He jerked his head toward a heavy velvet curtain that led to a private corridor. I have to go deal with him, I told Caleb. Caleb's hand tightened on my arm. I'm coming with you. He's volatile. No, I said. He needs to think he has me alone. He needs to feel confident so he makes a mistake. Watch the room. Keep Mr. Sterling happy. And wait for Sarah's signal. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. If you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm tearing that curtain down. I slipped away from the party and walked into the dim corridor. It was quiet here, the noise of the reception muffled. Derek was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. When he saw me, he lunged forward, grabbing my upper arm. Let go of me, I said calmly. You think you're smart, don't you? Derek sneered, his fingers digging into my velvet sleeve. Parading him around? C.W. Vance? Since when does the idiot have a brand? Did you set that up? Is this some sort of con? It's called talent, Derek, I said, pulling my arm free. Something you wouldn't recognize because you've never had any. You just steal it from others. Cut the crap, Derek growled. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded document. Sign the waiver. Now. You sign this, relinquishing all claims to the Greenwood Project designs and the company assets, and I won't ruin you. Ruin me? I laughed. You already tried that. You evicted me. You blacklisted me. You stole my credit. What's left to ruin? I can sue you for breach of contract, he said, his eyes wild. I can claim you stole proprietary data when you left. I have lawyers who will tie you up in court until you're selling that fake diamond necklace on the street for food. It's real, I said, touching the necklace. And so is this. I opened my clutch purse. I didn't pull out a pen to sign his waiver. I pulled out a thick, white envelope sealed with the official stamp of the Cook County Court. "What is that?" Derek asked, stepping back. "It's a countersuit, Derek," I said, shoving the envelope against his chest. "Filed this morning at 9 a.m. Racketeering, fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. Oh, and my lawyer also filed an injunction freezing the sale of the Lakeview property, the one you're using as collateral for Mr. Sterling's loan." Derek went pale. You can't. That deal closes on Monday. If the title is frozen, then the bank pulls the funding I finished for him. And Mr. Sterling finds out his future son-in-law is insolvent. UB*TCH, he whispered. He raised his hand, his face contorted in violence. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me. "Do it," I challenged him, standing my ground. "There's a security camera right there above the exit sign." "Hit me, Derek. Add assault to the list of felonies. I'd love to see you get arrested in your wedding tux." He froze. His hand hovered in the air, trembling. He looked at the camera, then back at me. The arrogance was cracking, revealing the cowardice underneath. He lowered his hand. "How much do you want?" he hissed. "Is that it? You want a payout? I can wire you $50,000 right now. Just leave. Take Caleb and leave." "I don't want your stolen money," I said. "I want the truth." "Nobody cares about the truth," Derek shouted, his voice cracking. "These people? They care about success. They care about the image. I give them that. You're just a bitter ex-wife trying to spoil the party. You think anyone will believe you over me?" "I think," I said, checking my watch, "that they're about to have a choice." "Derek?" A voice called from the curtain. It was Tiffany. She peeked her head in, looking confused. "Babe? Daddy is asking for us. The speeches are starting." Derek whirled around, composing his face into a mask of adoration instantly. It was terrifying to watch. "Coming, princess. Just handling a small vendor issue." He turned back to me, his eyes promising murder. "This isn't over. You say one word out there, and I will bury you." "Go ahead, Derek," I smiled. "Your public awaits." He straightened his tie, smoothed his hair, and walked out to his bride, leaving me alone in the hallway. He thought he had won the standoff. He thought I was bluffing. He had no idea that the real weapon wasn't the lawsuit in his pocket. It was the USB drive plugged into the main server in the control booth. I waited a moment before re-entering the ballroom. I needed to let my heart rate slow down. When I walked back in, the lights had dimmed slightly for dinner. I found Caleb near the edge of the dance floor. He handed me a fresh glass of sparkling water. "You okay?" he asked, scanning my face. "He tried to bribe me," I said. "Then he threatened me. The usual." "Did he touch you?" Caleb's voice dropped an octave. "He wanted to. But he's too afraid of the cameras." Before we could find our table, a shadow fell over us. I turned to see Tiffany standing there. Up close, she was undeniably pretty in that porcelain doll sort of way, perfect skin, big eyes, a dress that probably cost more than a luxury car. But there was a hardness in her eyes, a petulance that spoiled the effect. She wasn't alone, she had two bridesmaids flanking her like bodyguards in pastel chiffon. "So," Tiffany said, looking me up and down with a sneer. "You're the ex Derek said you might show up begging for money." I took a sip of my water. "Is that what he said?" "He told me everything," she said, crossing her arms. She flashed a massive diamond ring, 5 carats at least. "He told me how you couldn't handle his ambition. How you got lazy and stopped supporting him. It's sad, really. Trying to crash a wedding just to feel relevant? You're, what? 40? Shouldn't you be home with your cats? Her bridesmaids giggled. It was such a high school mean girl tactic that I almost laughed. Tiffany, I said gently, stepping closer. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to give you a wedding gift. A warning. I don't need your warnings, she snapped. I have a prenup. I'm protected. Does the prenup cover debt? I asked. Does it cover fraud committed in your name? Because that ring on your finger? I'd bet my life it was bought on credit. Probably a line of credit opened under your father's company without his knowledge. Tiffany blinked. Her confidence faltered for a microsecond. You're jealous. Derek is a genius. He's going to double my trust fund. He's going to drain it, I said. Just like he drained mine. I designed his buildings, Tiffany. I managed his books. I know the math. He needs your father's capital to pay off the loan sharks he owes for the marina project that failed last year. You're lying, she hissed, but her voice was shrill. She looked over at Derek, who was laughing loudly at the head table, refilling his wine glass. He loves me. He loves your last name, I said. Look, I know you think I'm the bitter old woman. But ask yourself, why won't he let you see the wedding vendor contracts? Why did he insist on using his accountant for the joint taxes? Why is he so desperate to close the deal with your dad by Monday? Tiffany chewed her lip. I could see the gears turning. She wasn't stupid, just sheltered. And deep down, she had noticed the red flags too. Go away, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Just go away. You're ruining my day. I'm trying to save your life, I said. Tiffany. Derek's voice boomed over the microphone. He was standing on the stage, spotlight hitting him. Where is my beautiful bride? Come up here, baby. Tiffany wiped her eyes, fixed her smile, and turned away from me. Security will be escorting you out after dinner, she threw over her shoulder. Enjoy the meal. It's the most expensive thing you'll ever eat. She sashayed up to the stage, beaming at the applause. I walked back to Caleb. I tried, I said. She wouldn't listen. Some people have to learn the hard way, Caleb said. He took my hand and led me to our table, table 18, way in the back, near the kitchen doors. It was the reject table, populated by distant cousins and former employees. But when we sat down, the people at the table didn't look at us like rejects. They looked at Caleb like he was a rock star. Is it true? A young cousin asked, leaning in. Are you really C.W. Vance? Caleb smiled, squeezing my hand under the tablecloth. Yes. And this is Elena. The woman who inspired my best work. I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the room temperature. We were sitting at the kids' table, but we felt like the only adults in the room. The dinner service was an exercise in excess. Waiters marched out with lobster thermidor and filet mignon. Champagne flowed like water. And through it all, Derek held court on the stage. He loved the microphone. He loved the attention. He paced back and forth, making toast after toast to himself. When I started this company, Derek boomed, his face flushed with drink and adrenaline. I had nothing but a vision. People told me I was dreaming too big. They told me I needed to play it safe. He paused for dramatic effect, looking directly at the back of the room where I was sitting. But I knew that to build a legacy, you have to shed the dead weight. You have to surround yourself with quality. He gestured to Tiffany and her family. And today, I have finally found the quality I deserve. The room applauded. I felt bile rise in my throat. He was erasing me again, rewriting history in real time. He's disgusting, Caleb muttered, gripping his fork so hard I thought it would bend. Wait for it, I whispered. Sarah just texted. The file is swapped. The lights dimmed further. A screen descended from the ceiling behind the head table. And now, the DJ announced a special video presentation celebrating the love story of Derek and Tiffany. Music swelled, some sappy ballad about endless love. The screen flickered to life. It started with photos of Derek and Tiffany on a yacht, rented, Derek and Tiffany in Paris, paid for with my stolen money. The guests oohed and awed. Derek stood with his arm around Tiffany, looking smug. He thought he had won. He thought I was just sitting in the back, defeated, watching his victory lap. But the video was just the appetizer. The main course was coming. I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the bankers, the investors, the family members who had enabled him for years. They were all buying the lie. They wanted to believe in the fairy tale because it made them feel safe. They didn't want to know that the castle was built on quicksand. But truth is a funny thing. You can bury it, you can paint over it, you can drown it in champagne. But eventually, it floats to the surface. Mr. Sterling stood up near the front. He took the microphone. Before the video concludes, he said, I want to say something. I want to invite someone up here who represents the history of this family. A man who I have come to admire greatly in just the last hour. Derek looked confused. Dad, we have a schedule. Hush, son, Mr. Sterling said. He looked out into the darkness. Caleb Vance? Would you do us the honor of saying a few words? The room went silent. Derek's jaw hit the floor. Patricia let out a small gasp. This wasn't in the script. The outcast wasn't supposed to speak. Caleb looked at me. He looked terrified. Go, I whispered. This is your moment. Speak for both of us. Caleb stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked through the tables, the spotlight finding him. He didn't walk with his head down anymore. He walked with the heavy, assured stride of a man who builds things that last. He stepped onto the stage. Derek tried to block him, but Mr. Sterling waved him away. Caleb took the microphone. He looked out at the sea of faces, then he looked at his mother, and finally, he looked at Derek. Caleb held the microphone loosely, comfortable in the silence that stretched across the ballroom. He didn't rush. He let the tension build, let everyone get a good look at the man they had dismissed for years. My brother talks a lot about value, Caleb began, his voice deep and resonant, no trace of a stutter or hesitation. He talks about the cost of things. The price of the marble, the cost of the land, the value of the deal. He turned to look at Derek. Derek was sweating profusely now, his eyes darting to the security guards, signaling them to move in. But Mr. Sterling held up a hand, freezing security in place. The tycoon wanted to hear this. I work with wood, Caleb continued, turning back to the crowd. And in my line of work, you can't lie to the material. You can paint over rot, you can varnish over a crack, but eventually, the structure fails. If the core isn't solid, the whole thing collapses. He walked a few paces, commanding the stage. For a long time, I was told I was the broken one in this family. I was told that because I work with my hands, because I don't wear a suit every day, I was worth less. I was the mistake. And I believed it. He looked at his mother, Patricia. She was trembling, clutching a napkin to her mouth. But then, Caleb said, his voice softening as he found me in the back of the room. I reconnected with someone who reminded me that value isn't about the image. It's about the foundation. Elena. A ripple of whispers went through the room. Derek stepped forward aggressively. That's enough, Caleb. Get off the stage. Caleb didn't budge. He turned on Derek, and for the first time, the anger flared hot and bright. I'm not finished, brother. You built this life, Caleb gestured to the lavish room, on the backs of people you think are beneath you. You took Elena's genius and called it your own. You took my silence and called it weakness. You took this family's name and sold it to the highest bidder. Security! Derek screamed, his voice cracking. Get him out of here. He's drunk. I'm stone sober, Derek, Caleb said calmly. Are you? Or are you just drunk on your own lies? Caleb turned to Tiffany, who was looking between the brothers with wide, frightened eyes. Tiffany, Caleb said gently. I don't know you. But I know my brother. And I know that love doesn't look like a business transaction. Love isn't about hiding assets or faking smiles. Love it's about seeing the other person. Really seeing them. Derek doesn't see you. He sees a bank account. You're jealous. Derek yelled, grabbing for the mic. You're a loser carpenter who's jealous of my success. Caleb pulled the mic away, his voice booming without needing to shout. I'm not jealous, Derek. I'm C.W. Vance. I make more with one table than you make in a month of scamming people. And I sleep soundly at night. The revelation hit the room like a physical wave. He makes more? He's successful? The narrative Derek had spun for 30 years evaporated in seconds. I came here tonight, Caleb said, his voice lowering, becoming intimate even in the huge room, not to ruin your wedding. But to stand next to the woman you tried to destroy. To show you that you can't break something that is made of stronger stuff than you are. He looked at me. Elena is the architect. She was always the architect. You are just the facade. And facades, they crumble. It was the perfect cue. Derek lunged. He actually threw a punch at his own brother on the stage. Caleb sidestepped it effortlessly, catching Derek's arm and holding him in place with the strength of a man who lifts oak beams for a living. Don't, Caleb warned. At that exact moment, the music cut out. The love story video on the giant LED screen flickered and died. A black screen appeared. Then, white text. From Derek Vance. To Miami_lover_69. Date, yesterday. The room gasped. The text on the screen was massive. Everyone could read it. Just one more day, babe. Once I sign the papers with the old man tomorrow, the funds transfer. We'll have the cash to cover the Cayman's debt, and I'll have power of attorney over Tiffany's trust. The old man is senile. He has no idea his bank is funding my exit strategy. Turn it off! Derek screamed, struggling against Caleb's grip. Turn it off! It's fake. It's AI. They hacked it. But the slides kept coming. A bank statement showing a negative balance of $4.5 million. An email to a contractor, use the cheap concrete on the foundation. Nobody looks underground. Pocket the difference. A blueprint, my blueprint, with my name crudely white-outed and Derek's signature scrawled over it. And finally, a chain of texts calling Patricia, his own mother, the dragon lady, and discussing which nursing home to dump her in once he got control of the estate. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb having just detonated, right before the shockwave hits. Mr. Sterling stared at the screen. He read the words senile old man over and over. His face turned a color I had never seen on a human being, a deep, bruised purple. Tiffany was staring at the screen, her mouth open. She read the part about the mistress in Miami. Derek broke free from Caleb and ran to the AV booth, waving his arms. Stop it! Stop it! I'll sue you all! But the damage wasn't just done, it was etched into the retinas of every important person in his life. The mask wasn't just slipped, it was torn off, burned, and the ashes scattered. Derek stood center stage, panting, looking out at the crowd. He looked for an ally. He looked at his mother. She turned her back. He looked at Tiffany. She was taking off her ring. He looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling slowly walked up the stairs to the stage. He was a heavy man, but he moved with purpose. He stood in front of Derek. "Senile?" Mr. Sterling asked, his voice shaking with rage. "Arthur, please, it's a deep fake, it's..." Mr. Sterling raised his hand and delivered a slap that echoed through the banquet hall like a thunderclap. Crack. Derek stumbled back, holding his cheek. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked at me, in the back of the room, and I raised my champagne glass in a silent toast. Checkmate. The moment Derek fell to his knees, begging Mr. Sterling to listen, the entire room erupted into chaos. The mask of the monster had finally fallen, revealing the terrified coward underneath. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. If you are listening to this and feeling that rush of justice, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. Let me know that you are amazing, and that you are walking this journey with me. Your support is a huge encouragement to me. Please comment 1 so I can recognize you, and now, let's hear the rest of my story. The chaos that followed was biblical. It wasn't just a wedding ending, it was an empire dissolving in real time. Mr. Sterling didn't just slap Derek, he grabbed the microphone and announced to the room, "The wedding is off." And to my legal team present here tonight, I want a forensic audit of every dime this man has ever touched. Call the district attorney. Tonight. Tiffany, the girl who I thought was just a vapid brat, surprised me. She walked up to Derek, who was still on his knees. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She reached down, took the 5-carat ring off her finger, looked at it with disgust, and dropped it into his champagne glass. "You're right about one thing, Derek," she said, her voice amplified by the mic Caleb had left on the podium. "My father is rich. Which means we can afford the best lawyers in the country to make sure you rot in jail." She turned and walked off the stage, her bridesmaids trailing her, kicking the train of her dress out of the way. Then there was Patricia. Derek, realizing he had lost the Sterlings, literally crawled, toward the edge of the stage where his mother was standing. "Mom," he sobbed. "Mom, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this. Help me. I need bail money. I need you to mortgage the house." Patricia stared at him. This was the son she had idolized. The son she had put on a pedestal while treating Caleb like dirt. And she had just seen the text messages where he planned to put her in a budget nursing home to steal her assets. She looked at Derek, then she looked over at Caleb, who was standing quietly by the side of the stage. Caleb, who was successful, honorable, and who had tried to warn her for years. Patricia walked over to Caleb. She reached out a hand, trembling. "Caleb." Caleb didn't move away, but he didn't reach back. He stood tall, his hands in his pockets. "You should go home, Mother," Caleb said. His voice wasn't angry. It was just tired. "You have a lot to think about." "Caleb, please," she whispered. "He's ruined us. You have to help. You have money, right? You're C.W. Vance. You can fix this. Even now." Even in the wreckage, she was asking the Outcast to clean up the Golden Boys' mess. Caleb shook his head slowly. "No, Mother. I fix furniture. I don't fix broken people who don't want to be fixed. You chose him. Now you have him." He turned his back on her. He walked down the stairs, through the crowd that parted for him like the Red Sea, and came straight to me. "Ready to go?" he asked. "More than ready," I said. We walked out together. Behind us, we could hear Derek screaming, police sirens wailing in the distance as they approached the country club, and the frantic shouts of a family tearing itself apart. We didn't look back. Not once. Leaving that ballroom felt like stepping out of a suffocating, perfumed coffin and taking a breath of fresh, clean air. The winter wind was still blowing outside, snow swirling in the parking lot lights, but I didn't feel cold. I felt electric. We got into Caleb's truck, a beat-up Ford that sat oddly amongst the Bentleys and Mercedes of the guests. He tossed his tuxedo jacket into the back seat and loosened his tie. "So," he said, starting the engine. The heater roared to life. "That went well." I started laughing. It started as a giggle and turned into a full-body release. I laughed until tears ran down my cheeks. Did you see his face? When the text about the nursing home came up? Caleb chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. I think the slap was my favorite part. Mr. Sterling has a heavy hand. He drove us away from the manicured lawns of Lake Forest, heading back toward the city. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a ravenous hunger. "I'm starving," I admitted. I didn't eat any of the lobster. "I know a place," Caleb said. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Chicago. I was still wearing my red velvet gown and the diamond necklace. Caleb was in his tuxedo shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing his forearms. We were eating greasy cheeseburgers and sharing a basket of onion rings. The waitress looked at us like we were time travelers, but she kept the coffee coming. "You are amazing up there," I said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "What you said about the foundation." Caleb stopped chewing. He looked at me across the Formica table, his blue eyes serious. "I meant every word, Elena. You were the only real thing in that family. Watching you work all those years, watching you tolerate his abuse and still create beauty, it kept me going. I thought, if she can survive this, so can I." I reached across the table and took his hand. His skin was rough, warm, and real. "We're free, Caleb," I whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." "No," Caleb said. "He can't." He flipped his hand over and interlaced his fingers with mine. "So, what happens now?" "The architect and the carpenter. Seems like a waste to break up the team." My heart did a little flip. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership," he said. "A real one. I have the workshop. You have the designs. We could build things, Elena. Real things. Not glass towers for egomaniacs, but homes. Furniture. Art. And?" I asked, sensing there was more. "And," he said, leaning in, his gaze dropping to my lips. "I'm hoping I can convince you to let me take you on a real date. One that doesn't involve subpoenas or crashing weddings." "I think I'd like that," I smiled. He leaned across the table and kissed me. It tasted like ketchup and coffee and victory. It was the best kiss of my life. 6 months later. Justice, they say, is blind. But in Derek's case, justice had 20/20 vision and a very bad temper. Because Mr. Sterling's lawyers moved fast, the police were waiting for Derek before he even left the country club that night. He was arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. Since he was a flight risk, thanks to the Miami texts, bail was denied. The Greenwood Project designs, my designs, were legally returned to me after Sarah provided the metadata proving I created them. Derek's assets were frozen and seized. The Porsche, the boat, the penthouse, all gone to pay back the creditors. He declared bankruptcy, but because fraud was involved, the debts weren't discharged. He will be paying them off for the rest of his life, assuming he ever gets out of prison. He's currently serving a 5-year sentence in a minimum security facility, working in the laundry room. I heard he complains about the fabric softener. Patricia lost the house in Lake Forest. It turned out Derek had leveraged it to the hilt without her fully understanding the paperwork. She lives in a small 2-bedroom condo in the suburbs now. She calls Caleb once a week, leaving crying voicemails about how lonely she is. Caleb hasn't blocked her, but he doesn't answer. He sends her a grocery gift card every month, enough to survive, but not enough to control him. It's more kindness than she deserves. Tiffany actually sent me a thank you card. It was brief, but she thanked me for saving her from a colossal mistake. She's currently in Bali, ironically, spending her trust fund on yoga retreats. Good for her. As for me? I'm standing in a sun-drenched studio in a converted warehouse in the West Loop. The sign on the door says Vance and Company Architecture and Design. But this time, the Vance isn't Derek. I walked over to the drafting table where a new set of blueprints is spread out. It's a boutique hotel we're designing. The wood elements are intricate, complex, and beautiful. The door to the workshop in the back opened, and Caleb walked in. He was covered in sawdust, wearing his trademark flannel. He looked happy. He looked at peace. "Hey," he said, coming over to wrap his arms around my waist. He kissed my neck. "The walnut delivery just arrived. It's gorgeous." "Don't get sawdust on the blueprints," I teased, leaning back into him. "I'm the boss," he grinned. "I do what I want." "Partner," I corrected him. "You're the partner." "Partner," he agreed. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the studio floor. It was one of those perfect Chicago evenings where the city looks like it's made of fire and gold. Caleb turned me around to face him. He wiped his hands on his jeans, looking suddenly nervous. It reminded me of the night in the diner. "Elena," he said. "I've been working on something. A side project." "Oh?" I asked. "Is it that rocking chair for the Miller Commission?" "No," he said. He reached into his pocket. "It's for us." He pulled out a small, wooden box. It was made of the same dark walnut as the necklace setting, polished to a mirror shine. My breath caught. "Caleb." He got down on one knee. Right there on the concrete floor, amidst the smell of cedar and graphite. "I spent 40 years thinking I was broken," Caleb said, looking up at me. "Thinking I didn't fit the blueprint of what a man should be. Then you came crashing back into my life, wearing velvet and carrying a lawsuit, and you showed me that the blueprint was wrong." Tears pricked my eyes. "Caleb, get up, you'll get your knees dirty." "I don't care," he said. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a massive, flashy diamond like the one Derek had given Tiffany. It was a ring made of macumegane, wood-grain metal, gold and silver folded together to look like tree rings. And set in the center was a sapphire, deep and blue like his eyes. "It's strong," he said. "It's layered. It's real. Like us." He took a breath. "Elena, will you build a life with me? No secrets. No lies. Just us, making something beautiful out of the mess?" I looked at the ring. I looked at the man who had stood by me when everyone else walked away. The man who saw my value when I felt worthless. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He was a master craftsman. He measured twice, cut once. He stood up and kissed me, lifting me off my feet. I buried my face in his neck, breathing in the scent of home. We didn't need a grand wedding in a country club. We didn't need to invite 300 people to witness our happiness. We had each other. We had our work. We had our dignity. Derek had invited me to his wedding to humiliate me, to show me I was nothing. Instead, he gave me everything. He gave me the push I needed to fight back. He gave me the chance to reclaim my name. And inadvertently, he led me straight to the love of my life. I looked over Caleb's shoulder at the framed invitation to Derek's wedding, which we kept on the wall of the studio as a joke. I smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's living a life so beautiful, so authentic, and so full of love that they simply cease to exist in your world. But destroying them publicly at their own wedding first? Yeah, that was pretty sweet too. And so, this story reminds us of an essential truth: resilience and self-worth are the keys to reclaiming our lives, no matter how deeply we've been hurt or underestimated. Life often places us in situations where we are tested, where we feel invisible, or where others try to define our value. But true strength lies in recognizing that no one has the power to diminish us unless we allow it. Elena's journey is a testament to the power of courage, self-belief, and the beauty of rebuilding, both within ourselves and in the world around us. It also teaches us that justice doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes, it's not about revenge but about rising above, finding peace, and creating a life so authentic and fulfilling that it silences every doubt, every insult, and every attempt to bring us down. Through her pain, Elena discovered her strength, her purpose, and a love built on mutual respect and authenticity, a love that no facade could ever replicate. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to fight for your worth or rebuild after being torn down? Share your thoughts below or simply comment good if you found this story inspiring. Let's celebrate resilience together.